When you think of the United Arab Emirates, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Is it those glittering skyscrapers that seem to pierce the clouds? Maybe it's those luxury airlines that completely changed the game for travel. Or hey, maybe it's a mission to Mars. It's an absolutely incredible story of ambition and transformation, and we're going to dive into exactly how it all happened.
I mean, just take a look at this list. We're talking about the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. One of the biggest and best airlines on the planet, Emirates. The sheer engineering guts it took to build a Palm Jumeirah, a man-made island you can actually see from space. And they didn't stop there. They sent the Hope probe all the way to Mars, and they hosted the entire world at Expo 2020. Seriously, these are achievements most nations would need centuries to pull off.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How did they do it? How does a collection of small, separate sheikdoms become a global powerhouse in just 50-some-odd years? Well, to get the answer, we got to go back in time. First up, we're going to look at how this nation was, in historical terms, truly built overnight. And it's a story that wasn't just born out of ambition, but out of a very real looming crisis. Because, before all the glitz and the glamour, the future for this part of the world was anything but certain. To really get the scale of what they accomplished, we have to rewind the clock to a time before the UAE even existed. So, what we now know as the UAE used to be a collection of 7 separate sheikdoms, and they were called the Trucial States. They had this really unique deal going on that started way back in 1820. Basically, they had these agreements with Great Britain where the British would handle all the external security, kind of like a protective shield, while each of the Emirates governed itself on the inside. This system was the status quo for nearly 150 years.
But then came the shocker. In 1968, the British government just announced it was pulling out. All of it. By 1971, that security shield they had relied on for generations was going to be gone. A hard deadline was set and the clock was ticking, loudly.
And this wasn't just some political shift. This was an existential crisis. Standing alone, each one of these small emirates was incredibly vulnerable in a pretty volatile region. They had to figure out a new way to survive, and they had to do it fast.
And this is where leadership really enters the story. Facing this massive challenge, 2 visionary figures stepped up, and they shared a single radical idea. You have Sheikh Zayed, the ruler of Abu Dhabi. He saw with total clarity that the only way forward, the only way to survive and even prosper, was to unite. And in Sheikh Rashid, the ruler of Dubai, he found a partner who completely shared that powerful vision. They both got it. Staying separate was a recipe for disaster.
And this right here shows their resolve. They met in 1968, literally right after the British dropped that bombshell, in what's now known as the Al Sameh meeting. This was the moment the idea of unity went from a what-if to a concrete plan. They shook hands and agreed, we are going to form a single, strong Arab nation. After years of tough, intense negotiations with all the other Emirates, right as those British treaties expired, they did it. On December 2nd, 1971, 6 of the 7 Emirates came together. The United Arab Emirates was officially born, with Sheikh Zayed as its very first president. And then, just a few months later, in early 72, the 7th Emirate, Ras Al Khaimah, joined in, completing the federation that we all know today. Okay, so forming a country is one thing, but building a global success story? That's a whole other ballgame. So how did they turn this newfound unity into such an unprecedented success? Well, they followed a very clear, very deliberate blueprint.
Their strategy really came down to 6 powerful pillars. First, you had visionary leadership that didn't just think about today, but invested a ton into education and healthcare for the future. Second, they were smart with their oil money. They didn't just spend it, they reinvested it into building world-class infrastructure. Third, they made the country an absolute magnet for global business with things like tax-free zones and super trade-friendly laws. Fourth, they understood that their best asset was people, welcoming talent from over 200 countries. Fifth, they made security and stability priority number 1, creating a safe haven. And finally, they were always looking ahead with these ambitious long-term plans.
And this quote just captures their whole philosophy perfectly. It shows you that the strategy was never just about building shiny towers. It was about building a nation from the ground up, by investing in its people and the systems that would help them succeed. And that brings us full circle. We've seen the crisis, we've seen the vision. Now let's connect the dots and see how that blueprint became the direct link from an uncertain past to the incredible destiny they've built. So the answer to our original question, how did they do it? It's right here.
It wasn't luck, it wasn't an accident, it was a focused, deliberate strategy that took a vision born out of a crisis and turned it into the reality we see all around us today. And look how clearly you can see the connections. Those business-friendly policies, bam, that's what created a global hub for trade and tourism. That commitment to a long-term national vision, that's how you get a probe orbiting Mars. That strategic use of oil wealth, that's how you build the world-class airports and ports that connect the country to the entire globe. It's cause and effect on a massive national scale.
When you boil it all down, a story that began with a huge threat, one that could have led to instability and chaos, was completely transformed through unity and vision into one of the most remarkable national success stories of our time.
Their first 50 years were, there's no other word for it, astonishing. And it just makes you wonder, after achieving all of this against all the odds, what could the next 50 years possibly look like?